And any of you who want coffee, please get up and get coffee. Reminder, I know Linda Watts had talked with us last week about the study that will start on October 9th. So 3 weeks from today on the parables. And if you would like the parable book that they'll be studying, and it's from Kerygma, which is a wonderfully solid program. It's a very good program for studies. It gives you lots of information. And if you would like that book, let Linda know. She'll make sure she gets an order.
Most people signed in last week, and I emailed people. Anybody here signed up? I think everybody did. Okay.
That we will have, so next week we will finish up the Revelation churches. The week after that we'll have a special gathering with McKinney, who's going to be talking with us about her work with the indigenous and kind of some of the indigenous women who have kind of disappeared, which is really frightening. And she also went to the General Assembly and was kind of working there, so she's going to update us on that. And then the next week we'll start the parables class. So just know that's kind of the plan. We've learned in COVID that we make our plans and we adjust and we do things. So we acknowledge that. So far, we have done Ephesus, which was the Church of Laodicea Orthodoxy. We've done Smyrna, which is the Church of the Persevering Persecuted. We've done Pergamum and Thyatira. We did those last week, and those both were the churches of idolatrous compromise. So today we move on to Sardis. And I want you to look at your, I try to include some pictures to give you some ideas and also include the map so you can kind of see where we are. So we kind of have gone as far north as we're going to go with Pergamum. And now we're kind of going south, but we're still inland. So we come to Sardis. It's a big city inland, and it's known for its Acropolis, which is why I have the picture below. Acropolis is high place, high place. What I want you to see on this, which is just fascinating, is that there isn't as much. Pergamum was on top of the hill as well, and you can have more of a city there. For Sardis, it's a smaller space. But it also has these cliffs around it. If you can see on your picture, that part of going up to the Acropolis are these cliffs that are really hard to go up, and that's going to be important as we look at this. There were people who lived on top of the Acropolis, usually the more wealthy or the folks who were the security people to kind of watch out and see. A big part of Sardis is actually down below where they have kind of the main area, but really the kind of city part was up top, the wealthier people were up top. And one other thing about Sardis, which is going to be interesting, which you can look on your back page, is there was a really large synagogue here, which is kind of fascinating. And I hadn't found anything that said specifically why. Why was there such a large synagogue in Sardis, such a large Jewish population? But there was. So you'll see I included some pictures from the synagogue and also some pictures on the back of a temple. Of course, each place has a temple. And they have kind of reconstructed the gymnasium. Because this was a big thing. And this was big in most Roman cities. They would kind of make these big gymnasiums. And they'd have these big open spaces for games out front, and then gymnasium, and then kind of places for the water for pools. So that's just to kind of give you a feel for Sardis. And that's going to be important as we look at what the message to Sardis is. So would somebody be willing to read Revelation 3, 1 through 6? It's on the paper handed out. So this is the message to Sardis. Somebody be willing to read that?
And to the angel of the church in Sardis write, these are the words of him who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works. You have a name of being alive, but you are dead. Wake up, strengthen what remains and is on the point of death. For I have not found your works perfect in the sight of my God. Remember then what you received and heard. Obey it and repent. If you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come to you. Yet you have still a few persons in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me dressed in white, for they are worthy. If you conquer, you will be clothed like them in white robes, and I will not blot your name out of the book of life. I will confess your name before my Father and before his angels. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches.
Great, thank you. Okay, so as we look at Sardis, we go through our regular thing of what we find. So what is the Christ title that we get from Sardis? We have in 3:1 the words of him who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. So in Revelation 4:5 links the 7 spirits with the 7 lamps. Remember, we kind of have the lamps for the churches. So there's some link between that. And Revelation 5:6 links the 7 spirits of God with the 7 eyes. So again, these are the images of Revelation, which can be hard because they kind of can connect to a lot of things that mean a lot of different things. I put in here for you to kind of look at and read Zechariah 4:2-10, which is a vision of a golden lampstand, which is Israel, and the 7 lamps and the 7 eyes, which refer to the activity of the Spirit of God. Yeah.
What's so special about the number 7?
7, what do you think? Days of creation. It's kind of seen as a holy number, an idea of being complete. So if anything is less than 7, it's not fulfilled, it's not complete, it's not finished. So 7 really has the idea of the 7 days of creation, the days of 7 being complete, and the day or the 7 of God's creation all being fulfilled. Yeah. So yes, so that's an important thing. But I just want you to kind of get an idea of this image of how it kind of flows through. And this is what we know about John of Patmos, is that he likes to kind of take these images from the Old Testament. Zechariah's vision contrasts the human power to rebuild the temple with God's power. So it's kind of the thing, are you going to be with the 7 spirits? Are you going to be with God's power? Or are you going to try to do it on your own? Is kind of the question. And so the 7 spirits of God is this idea of the working of God present here and now, right? So putting this statement of Christ as him who has the 7 spirits, the one who has the fulfillment of God, who has the completeness of God, who has the Spirit of God that's working here and now. Okay? So that's kind of, and then the 7 stars, you may remember. It may seem like a while ago, but we talked about the 7 stars with the Avicia church. And that we talked about how in the Roman days that often the Roman coins would have the emperors holding up the 7 stars, kind of meaning the emperor was control of everything. And so again here, it's this idea of Christ is the one holding the 7 stars. So it's not the emperor, it's not the Roman emperor, it's Christ who's holding that. So the commendation, what is the church doing well? Nothing. This is one of those points we did that when we had the complaint. We had a couple of churches that didn't have the complaint, and now we have a church where, oh my goodness, they can't even say one good thing this church is doing. There is no commendation, which it really kind of stands out to you after we've seen this pattern and how this pattern is so entrenched in these letters, that all of a sudden it's just not there. So it's supposed to kind of take you by shock. And it's supposed to have you go, holy moly, that makes a statement. If there's not one thing that they can say about Sardis that is positive. We will have that happen one more time. Okay? So that will happen one more time. But this just shows you that when John is sharing this letter, it's a pretty serious statement. Okay, so the complaint. I know your works. You have a name for being alive, but you are dead. That's pretty harsh, right? And it actually is the complete opposite of the Christian story. Right? The Christian story is the story of Jesus who was dead and is now alive. Right? So it's the complete opposite of that. And so basically, you can see why there's no commendation. They seem to be going the complete opposite of the Christian story. So the correction. So we get all of that in the first verse, right? So it's pretty condensed. So the correction. The correction starts with verse 2. Wake up and strengthen what remains, and is at the point of death, for I have not found your works perfect in the sight of my God. Remember then what you have received and heard, obey it and repent. So wake up literally is to be watchful. That may remind you of some parables that Jesus said about being watchful. Here's the thing about Sardis, which is really interesting, is that Sardis was known throughout the ancient world because of the way it's set up, because of the picture I have for you, that their message went out, we are the city that cannot be conquered. Right? Look at us. We're at the top of the Acropolis. Nobody can get up here except by one side, one small side. We can beat anybody up. You ever been nervous when you hear somebody say that? Because throughout the ancient world, that is known as Sardis's statement, but we also have 2 times that Sardis was actually captured. Okay, so this is part of what he's talking about. Wake up, pay attention, be watchful, you people who think you don't have to worry about anything. Right? You people who think you have it all set. The Sardis, the Acropolis, consisted of a small plateau, 1,500 feet high. It's surrounded on 3 sides by vertical cliff faces that make it seemingly unconquerable. Others of the time to say to capture the Acropolis of Sardis was to do the impossible. Modern analogy might be when folks used to say, oh, to go to the moon, right, which seemed impossible until we did. It was conquered not once but twice because of the local king's complacency, because of the belief that, oh, we're Sardis and no one can get us, right? So it was captured in BC, 560, 547. And in BC 215. So both times it was conquered was before Jesus was born. So this is known throughout the ancient world. This is just to kind of tell you, this is known throughout the world. Capture of the supposedly unconquerable Acropolis at Sardis became a well-known story throughout the ancient world, and as an example of the danger of foolish pride and vanity that led to the problem of being complacent about victory. So what does complacency mean? How would you define complacency?
Satisfied.
Satisfied.
Searching.
No, not searching. One definition you hit on this is self-satisfaction accompanied by unawareness of actual dangers, right? So complacency, it's some sense of, yeah, being satisfied, but also not being aware that there's something out there, right, that you should be aware of. It's almost like a warning.
Like we were before COVID.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there probably are a lot of examples we might put. I mean, I might say today, I think for my generation, there's a complacency about America always being a democracy. And maybe we've been challenged to say, oh gosh, we actually have to work to keep that. Maybe that's a challenge to my generation, those after, is that, oh, you actually have to work for it. It's kind of like a shock. We didn't realize that. That was kind of like a shock to the system. One example of complacency was an example on August 11th, 1974. After 6 years of careful planning, a French high wire walker named Felipe Petit walked on cable 1,362 feet above the ground between the Twin Towers in New York City. And The Man of Wire is a 2008 movie about Petit's amazing, death-defying walk on these high wires. But in '75, so a year later, Petit's fame got him a job with the Ringling Brothers Circus. On that day, Petit was to premiere with the circus. During a practice session, he fell off the wire some 25 to 30 feet. So here's the thing. This is a guy who walked 1,362 feet over New York City. And then he's practicing, he's not paying attention, and he's 25 to 30 feet high. And it didn't kill him, but he was hurt. And he was angry at himself, and he said, I can't believe it, I don't ever fall. You know, this cannot happen, I don't fall. Right, so that's complacency is kind of this concept of, yeah, I don't fall, that can't happen.
Self-assuredness.
Self-assuredness, yeah, that's a good term, self-assuredness. So, for our message to Sardis, John of Patmos is saying, strengthen what remains. For I have not found your works perfect, or I have not found your deed complete. So this idea of the completeness of the seven at the beginning, it's not complete, you're not done. And meaning that the Sardis church, hey, people, you better wake up and you better start doing some work. Right? You can't just hang back and sit. Remember what you received and heard, obey it, and repent. So I mean, he's giving them a list of things to do in terms of what they need to do. The consequence, so what happens if you don't follow through on these things? And we go to verse 3. If you do not wake up, remember that's what he said at the beginning, wake up, wake up. If you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come. That might ring a bell to you for some parables too, right? This idea of pay attention, of watchfulness, of be awake, because you don't know. Yeah, maybe.
So reminiscent of Paul's letter to the Thessalonians. I will not repeat one person will be taken to prison.
Yeah.
There's led to a whole lot of John literature. And Paul's letter to the Thessalonians was written before many of the Gospels.
Right.
So this image of thief was present in the early churches before Jesus in the Gospels said anything about the watchful.
And that's great, you know, and that's a wonderful comparison. Dave was comparing with the letter of the Thessalonians, if you all didn't quite hear, and that there is the image in that too of pay attention or the thief's going to come, right? And you don't know. And the thing about this is Paul was speaking to a church who very much the same idea, who kind of they were all like saying, oh, we're saved, we don't have to worry about it, okay, we've all been baptized Christians, and now we can just chill and do what we want and not worry about anything. And Paul was saying, hey people, you know, the end of the world's going to come, but you have to still pay attention and still be active. And was warning them to kind of keep that up, because the people come in the night and you won't know. So yeah, and that was written before the gospel. So very much this idea that image had been present throughout the early Christian community. And certainly is one that continues here. Thank you, that's a great point. And let's see, so that theme certainly comes through. And you can see that's why I wanted to keep the picture, or to have a picture of you looking at Sardis, so you just get this idea of how it does look like this this place that you cannot penetrate. But it did happen twice, so it's kind of this warning that's out there. Here, Jesus' coming results in punishment, not a blessing. You know, and I often wonder, sometimes those who are looking so much for the end of times, I say, you know, it wasn't always a blessing when Jesus came. Sometimes there are some people who got some punishment. So that's the consequence if they don't change their behavior. The positive, if they do change their behavior, and he says, you still have a few persons in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me, dressed in white, for they are worthy. If you conquer, if you remember, this is something we've heard several times too. So if you conquer, if you make this change, you will be clothed like them in white robes. And I will not blot your name out of the book of life. I will confess your name before my Father and before his angels. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the church is saying to the churches. So, have not soiled their clothes. You know, certainly that is a constant image of things of remaining clean, of remaining pure, being dressed in white. You know, often that's referred to as kind of moral purity. And Revelations later in chapter 6, 7, 13, and 14, so repeatedly, says that martyrs in heaven are given white robes. So these are people who are seen to have been holy. That heavenly messengers wear white in Matthew and John and Acts and Revelation. That God in Daniel wears white on the throne. That priests in the ancient world wear white. So that's just to say in terms of just knowing that this is something important about those who wear white robes, robes that have not been defiled, kind of speaks about your proximity with the throne. Okay. Book of Life. Old Testament and New Testament speak of the book of life, of the names of those who have been elected or saved, that they're written in the book of life, and that the names of the wicked are blotted out. So this idea of, well, if you want to be in the eternal kingdom, you have to have your name in the book of life. Revelation has 6 references to the book of life, so this is important to John of Patmos. And along with that, the same idea, if you're written in the book of life, that your name will be acknowledged before my Father and his angels. And it kind of goes with it, yes, this was written after Matthew, but Matthew 10, 32 to 33 says, everyone therefore who acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever not denies me before others, I will deny before my Father in heaven. So Christ here is not the judge, but the defender and advocate, that he's the one that you want him defending your name when you get there. The interesting thing about Sardis is that it's a letter where the enemy is not external, right? Nothing here is he talking about those who say they're Jews or those who are worshiping other people or those, I mean, he's not making references to some of those others that have been in the other letters. This one is specifically because the church is not doing what the church is supposed to do.
This is another connection to the idea that John's gospel letter is John of Patmos. Because John of Gospel of John is chapter 4. There's a strong sense of advocacy. I was saying, advocate, we stand next to you, advocate for you, that's saying.
Okay, so connecting to the image in the Gospel of John with Jesus saying, I'm going to send you an advocate, I'm going to send you someone who will be there with you, who will advocate for you. Yeah, definitely a connection to that. So maybe possibly, yeah. Like I said, tradition says it was written by the guy who wrote the Gospel of John. Some scholars question that. We don't know. So that's something you can kind of ferret out and see what your thoughts or your feelings are. I find this question of complacency very interesting, I think. I mean, I think all of the churches speak to us. But I think this one, especially as people who've grown up, or as I, who've grown up in the U.S., which has always, since my lifetime, had some sort of privileges, there's a lot of sense that will always be there. And you know, sometimes I gotta wonder and think about my niece and my nephews, will that always be there? Yeah.
Sometimes I think, well, hearing the alliterations you're using, complacency could also feel like arrogance. And where do we, I don't know, it just kind of helps me think about where do I have arrogance about something that honestly humility should take its place. Sometimes we feel, well, I know a bit more, or I've lived through a bit more, or I wouldn't be in that situation because I would have done things differently. And it's that's arrogance speaking. That's not coming from the teachings of Jesus.
Yeah, good point. That there is, I think, complacency, and often we think of it as kind of not doing a lot, but I do think you're right. There's some sense of arrogance that comes with that because there's some sense of, oh, I don't have to, you know? This is just the way it is. And there's a sense of not, and again, as we talked about the definition, there's some sense of not being aware. So there's some arrogance too, and just not being aware of what else is going on around you, which I think is interesting that this is one of our letters. Yes, David.
There's a sense of privilege in that also. A story from my own time of being a pastor. In every church I served, there were some people who said, well, my grandmother's been a church member of this church for years. And the subsequent comment has to do with, well, because she was a member, I'm privileged to do something with this church. Which really raises the issue of every generation has to take the church out of faith out of its own name.
Yeah.
Which I don't see happening in Sardis. The one phrase that comes to mind is the church is always one generation away from extinction.
Yeah. The church is always one generation away from extinction. Yeah. Which is a powerful message. And a message of sometimes we just assume, you know, that what words our parents or grandparents, that passes down to us. And thank you for sharing that in some sense of, sometimes, no, that doesn't always work. Yeah.
Another short phrase saying that God has no grandchildren.
God has no grandchildren. I like that. That's good. That's good. What I like to think of, and part of this, you know, and some of this, you know, I get nervous when there's a lot of who's in and who's out, and that always makes me nervous because I tend to think heaven's going to be much bigger than we think it is. But one of my mentors had a great point that said that specifically, because she said, you know, if God really is going to be that adamant about all these rules, not many of us are making it. If we're honest, if God's really that adamant about everything, so maybe it's bigger than we think. And the question she would ask following that up, which I loved, is she would say, so who might you see in heaven that would surprise you? And it's wonderful you think about who, you know, just imagine if you were in the heavenly kingdom and you're walking around and you see somebody and you go, what are you doing here? Right? I mean, who would that be? But then she would follow that up with, and who would be surprised to see you? And you're like, oh. But again, it's kind of back to this sense of, and kind of this sense of entitled. Am I just entitled? Or might there be somebody who would be a little surprised that I was there and I need to kind of say, oh, yeah, I made some mistakes, right? You know.
Yeah, I think assumption is really dangerous when we all see that something will be done, but if we don't step forward in certain situations of help, we always assume somebody else is going to do it for us. Or we think, oh, it'll happen. Or you have to have an inner support system that somebody gets behind you and says, do this.
Yeah, that's a great point is, you know, what part does assumption have in this too? I mean, complacency had this idea of, well, no one would dare attack us. And so there's an assumption of that, oh, we're so great, no one would bother, you know, and it's like, well, wait a minute. Or is there something that you assume will happen, and unless somebody actually does it, it won't, you know, you need to participate in it. Yeah, that's a great word to add into this discussion, which I think is an important part of it. Yeah. Great comments. So we say Sardis is the church of deadly complacency. So we are moving. I know we're kind of going fast again, but I'm trying to get us to do two churches today so we can do one church next week and we can wrap it up next week. So our next church today is Philadelphia. And you have that here, Revelation 7 to 13. Will someone read us Philadelphia? Karen had her hand up for Sardis. Can I hand it to you for Philadelphia? She's looking at me all around. You have your hand up on Sardis, so you'll read Philadelphia. Thank you.
to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Look, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word indeed, and have not denied my name. I will make those of the synagogues of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but are lying, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word of patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast to what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. If you conquer, I will make you a pillar in the temple of my God. You will never go out of it. I will write on you the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem that comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches.
Okay, great, thank you. So Philadelphia, what we know about Philadelphia, it was established in 189 BC by King Eumenes II of Pergamum. And Eumenes II named the city for the love of his brother, who would be his successor, Attalus II, and whose loyalty earned him the nickname Philadelphus, literally meaning one who loves his brother. So the coins of this period show two identical brothers. You know, often they have coins of the leaders. So coins would have a brother's face on one side and the other brother's face on the other side. So that is kind of the basis for Philadelphia. So the Christ title. And to the angel of the Church of Philadelphia, these are the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. So Holy One is a common title for God in the Old Testament. The title occurs 20 plus times in Isaiah alone. Holy One. So really, by declaring Christ the Holy One here, John and Patmos is kind of declaring the divinity of Christ and putting Christ as the true one. And most likely, it's kind of a statement, as he mentions the Jewish people here, a statement against the Jewish people who say, no, you know, not that even if Christ was a great person, did not have a divine connection. That John and Patmos is trying to say, no, he does have a divine connection. The interesting thing here is this image of the key and the door. And so I gave you Isaiah 20 through 25 for you to read. But this is talking about this idea that access to king and palace in ancient Israel was administered through an official known as the master of the palace. And during the reign of Hezekiah, the master of the palace was held by Shebna. And Shebna reveals his vanity by making a grave for himself in a prominent place among the tombs of the king. So this is a guy who is the master of the palace and decides to carve for himself a grave that will be next to the king's. And God is not happy. God is not happy with this and promises to give his keys, i.e. his authority, his power, his control, to someone else. Right? And that's what's happening in this passage in Isaiah. And he gives them to Eliakim, who's given the key of David as a symbol of, okay, I've taken this authority away from this guy who's misused it and been vain and taken things over, and I'm going to give it to somebody else. So this idea of the one who has the keys, the one who can open and close the doors, is referring to kind of absolute authority. There are thoughts and wonders that this might also be a way of starting to refer to the Jewish community. And we know John of Patmos is living at a time when there's beginning to be a separation between those who are Christians and those who are Jews. And that there were times when the Jewish synagogue was actually closed to people who were followers of the way. Right? So this might be kind of a way to kind of slide in there, hey, people who've blocked those of us out who are followers of the way but wanted to come to the synagogue. You know, Christ is the one who has the keys, you know. Right? So that would be part of what he's saying. So the main point of this image here is this idea that it is Christ who has the keys to the kingdom of God. Right? That's what they're trying to say. So the commendation, what they're doing well. And that starts with verse 8. I know your works. Look, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but are lying. I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word of patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. So this, I think, is our longest commendation. Basically, overall, commend the Philadelphia church for persevering in the midst of persecution, especially at the hands of the local Jews. And again, the image of the open door, like in the Christ title here, the doors are open and no one can shut it. And you have not denied my name. So we do know that there were times going on, or images of, and again, this gets back to this understanding of the Roman Empire and Jews who are followers of the way, and Christians, and kind of how all that comes together. So we do know that Pliny the Younger, in a letter to Emperor Trajan, and says, sends him an anonymous document that was published containing the names of many persons. And these names were those who denied that they were or had been Christians, and then were looking to be set free. And the others named by the informers declared that they had been Christians, but then denied it, asserting that they had ceased to be, some 3 years before. Others as many as some 25 years. And they, the image was, do you worship the images of the Roman gods, and do you curse Christ? Right? That was their way of saying, okay, we're not following Christ anymore, we'll worship the Roman gods. We know Emperor Trajan's response to the letter was, you observed proper procedure, my dear Pliny, in shifting the cases of those who have been denounced to you as Christians. If they are denounced and proved guilty, they are to be punished, with this reservation, that whoever denies that he is a Christian and really proves that is by worshiping our gods, even though he was under suspicion in the past, shall obtain pardon through repentance. So this idea of there being pressure at this time, kind of close to the end of the first century, turn of the first century, pressure for those to publicly worship the local Roman gods, and some of those in the Christian way to deny that. We know that this was something that was present and was common. So they're commended for standing up for that. Correction. Any correction here? Nope. They're doing good. They don't need to be corrected. They got it. Right? They got it. Christ controls whether the door is open. It's open here. Keep that in mind for next week. Like Smyrna, there's a division between the synagogue of Satan, who say they're Jews and are not. Right? So that's the same language that is used in Smyrna. In Smyrna, they were guilty of blasphemy, and here they're accused of lying. Right? So there's some sense that those are folks who are kind of along the same path. The interesting thing is there is a particularly personal and warm address to Israel concerning the love of God for the chosen people. And that's something that is central here. Jesus is coming here as an assurance, not a threat. This is a group we think that is predominantly Jewish and adhered closely to the Jewish tradition and welcomed John as a prophet. No correction, but instead they're told to hold on, to stand firm in the midst of persecution. Hold on to what you have. And what the church does have is an open door to the kingdom of God and the good news that Jesus has the key. So, consequences, right? The consequences, I mean, you can't have a negative consequence for not doing the correction if you don't have a correction, right? But there still is a sense that of lifting the people up and saying that no one will take their crown. And remember, we saw this before. It's probably not a real crown, but a wreath that was given at athletic or military winners. That also was something we said in Smyrna. New Testament writers use the image of this wreath as a metaphor for the spiritual reward of eternal life. 1 Peter 5:4 says, "And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive an unfolding crown or wreath of glory." And we do know that athletic games were especially prominent in Philadelphia. So they would understand this connection to kind of what is rewarded after games. So for the positive, if you conquer, I will make you a pillar in the temple of my God. You will never go out of it. And again, remember, if these are people who feel like they've been kicked out of the synagogue, that's going to be important to them. I will write on you the name of my God, the name of the city of my God, and the new Jerusalem that comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. So Christ will make you a pillar. So, imagine all these images we have of these temples, that the pillar is such a huge part of kind of holding things up. And an individual pillar, like today, we use the idea of a pillar of community, somebody who's an example, somebody who's a leader, somebody who is central. And so that was similar there too. The temple of my God, the pillar is located among God's presence. So again, kind of close to the kingdom. The idea of never getting out. The other thing to know about Philadelphia is Philadelphia also was a place that tended to have major earthquakes. So a lot of the citizens lived outside of the city because they didn't want to be in the city in case there was an earthquake and something fell in on them. Right? So this would be meaningful to them in terms of, you won't ever have to go out of it. You won't ever have to leave. You won't ever have a threat that comes to you in that way. Christ will write 3 names. So pillars with names on it were common in the ancient world, just like we today would sell bricks, for fundraising. It's kind of, it was a way to do that. To have the name of someone or something means that person belongs to God. Right? If God has your name, you belong to God. One of the interesting things when I was in Egypt, I became fascinated with Hatshepsut, who was the one queen pharaoh, the one pharaoh who was a woman. And she was pretty powerful. What we know is when she died, we don't know who, but people went around to the list of pharaohs. Several of the temples had lists of pharaohs there, and they went to scratch out her name. And the idea was, and this was true in the ancient world, if you scratch out all of the names, you scratch out the person. Right? So this was their way to scratch out that she was ever a part of history. Luckily, she built a huge temple, so we kind of know that she was there. But again, it's this idea of God having your name, right? It's not just your name, it's your person. Right? It's the person who you are. And so this idea of the name of the New Jerusalem means they belong, they have citizenship, they are part of, they are included in this heavenly kingdom or city. Right? And God has their name, so it won't be scratched out. And there's a new name. And that we can kind of think of, or to me comes to mind of Paul saying in Christ you're a new creation. Kind of like a new beginning. So Philadelphia is the church of the persevering persecuted. I know I was going kind of fast, I was trying to get through too, but we have time for comments, yeah.
Is it a passage, Sardis, about the book of life? Now the book of life has disappeared, but the name has not disappeared. It's written in a different way.
Yeah.
Curious space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point, that we have the book of life in Sardis, and this one is a name. It doesn't need to be in the book of life, but it's a name that's known and remembered, and that those are, different images. But that's part of Revelation. We have so many images in Revelation, sometimes it's harder to work our way through them. But yeah, good point. And that is, again, part of my hope in this class for you all is that we realize at least some, there's probably tons more that we don't know, but some connections that when we know something about the cities, maybe it helps us understand the letter. If we know that Philadelphia had earthquakes and that was a big fear, we know this idea of being in a place and not having to leave is important. Or Sardis, this idea of being high up and no one can get you. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, they can. So it kind of, when we know a little bit, there's probably tons more we don't know. And so there may be other things about Book of Life or, I would, if we were talking Ephesus, I would say the library, but we don't know about any library in Sardis. That's not an image we have there. But there may be some other reason why that was important for that group or that message.
And what do we know about the size of Philadelphia and the composition of the population?
I don't remember. I didn't look that up. Sorry about that. Good question. Yeah, but certainly we know, that idea of the city of brotherly love is one certainly that comes to our Philadelphia here in the States. So that image is one that certainly has remained among people. All right, so next week is the Church of Laodicea, which is one of my favorites because it has to do with the Roman baths, and the Roman plumbing system. So this one's fun. But also think about, because next week we'll wrap up our study of this letter to the 7 churches, so you can think about whatever thoughts or questions you have to bring as we kind of wrap it up next week and kind of complete this session. So that's it. Thank you.